I'll do a very brief recitation of my credentials. It's important for folks to know a little bit about that. I graduated Columbia University in New York City. I was summa cum laude Phi Beta Kappa. My degrees were in literature, writing, and secondary education. I loved classroom teaching. I did that for a number of years, got my master's degree. Last year, did my PhD. Guess what? In global leadership related to college access, of course. And I am the founder of 3 different companies that all specialize in academic services. So as we're talking about, my own background and my own credential, just know that I am completely committed to this work and have been for more than 2 decades. Just so you know, if you're not already connected to me on social, I have a great YouTube channel called College Admissions Simplified. There are like more than 80 videos there with content that will help you. I also oversee a parent group on Facebook, also called College Admissions Simplified. And I'm active on Facebook and Instagram at Pamela M. Donnelly. So you can find me there. I'm the mom of 3 kids, so I know how the parents feel in this. And really my professional commitment is just making sure that you do not have to be stressed, that I give you strategies so you are less stressed. Now, our agenda is going to start with financial aid. I'm going to go into quite a bit of detail here. Again, please save your questions for the end, but you can also put them in chat and I'll address them at the end. We're going to talk about how much college costs, some acronyms you need to know. What are the categories? There are 3 types of aid that every family should know. And I want you to know this webinar is for you, whether you are a high net worth family or whether you are from a family that might even be eligible for Pell Grants and some of the larger free tuition opportunities based on being from a lower socioeconomic status. I firmly believe that every student deserves a level playing field based on how hard they work, and it shouldn't have to do only with socioeconomic status, right? So we're going to talk about what are some strategies, no matter who you are, no matter what background you have, so that you can compete fairly for these coveted spots at these highly desirable colleges. We're going to talk about some scams I want you to avoid, tips to securing merit-based aid. We're going to then go into a little bit about right fit college. How do you figure that out? We're going to talk about test optional, guys. There's so much misinformation about that, and I'm going to show you some data that I think you're going to find very interesting. But I need you to see what's happening so you can make an informed decision. All right, we're going to talk about exam timelines and what classes students should be taking. I do have some gifts at the end, so you'll stick around for that. And then we'll go into Q&A. Easy, breezy, and down the road we go. Okay, so I am inviting and encouraging you to take screenshots in this webinar. There are people who will say to you, please don't take. I'm saying, please feel free. If you see something that's helpful and you want to screenshot it and forward it to a friend or post it on your own social or whatever you want to do, this is for you, but this can help other people as well. Take a look at some of what we're going to talk about. First of all, the cost of college. Guys, these are the most expensive schools last year. I mean, there's my alma mater, holy moly, $65,000. And by the way, you think that's for 4 years? That's for 1 year. That's $250,000 plus for an undergraduate degree. So think about that. And notice the pro tip. He's warning you. He's saying, don't just multiply by 4. Did you know between 10 and 20% of students these days take at least 1 extra semester and sometimes a year or more to complete an undergraduate degree, which people call a 4-year degree, but that doesn't mean you're getting out in 4 years. That really depends on the sequence of classes. It depends on the major. It depends on a lot of things. What I did to economize back in my undergrad days was I took summer courses. And when you take summer courses, you can take 18 credits instead of just 12 or 15, and you can bang it out much more quickly. I finished Columbia in 2.5 years. So, it can be done. You have to be a little bit driven, maybe a little crazy like me, but it can be done. And it is a way to economize. So this is the high end, and it's, very intimidating. I want to say that in-state schools at the low end, I've seen as low as approximately 7,000 a year. I have seen as, you know, a range going up into 15 or so K per year, but that does depend on the income level of the family. And obviously, if they're in-state, they're getting those advantages. But let's look at how these acronyms are going to inform the way you think about the financial aid piece. So we're talking about financial aid first. In a little bit, we're going to talk about some academic strategies. But I want to ask you, if I gave you a quiz, we got our little buddy, I call him Rufus. He's just sitting there taking a quiz. If I gave you a quiz and said, please tell me what these 4 acronyms stand for, could you do it? Do you know what COA is? EFC, CSS, and FAFSA. You probably have heard of the FAFSA, but do you know what it stands for? So it's important because these acronyms are going to, in large part, determine how much free and how much loan tuition you're going to be able to access. I want to give you a formula before I reveal the answers to these 4 acronyms. And you're going to just jot this down. It's not on a slide, but I want you to write this down and then you're going to think about it with me. Ready? So COA, this is almost like an equation, right? Like in math. COA minus EFC equals need. And I'm using quotation marks around need because need doesn't just mean, hey, I want, right? Need is actually a mathematical formula that is calculated by your FAFSA and your CSS. So understanding need is important, and understanding the gap between what the government or the institution is saying that you require to be able to pay and what you are actually able to pay. Those can be 2 very different things. They can have all kinds of opinions, but you're the one looking at your bank account going, oh boy, I don't think so, right? So let's take a look at what these are. So the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. You're going to go to fafsa.gov and make sure you fill out your FAFSA. In order to get ready, you need to make sure you have 2 years of your tax returns. So that'll be 2021 and 2022 for students who are seniors in the 2023 to 24 year. That preparation of the prior year, right, that these institutions as well as the government are going to be looking at is really going to help them determine what they think your EFC is. That's your expected family contribution. So they are figuring out what they think you should be able to pay. This would be a real good image to screenshot if you haven't already done so, because you've got some solid definitions here. And keep in mind that, you know, this gap can be bridged through grants, through loans, through private scholarships. And I'm going to show you some of those categories in a moment. Stafford loans are a possibility, which are from private lenders. There are both subsidized and unsubsidized loans. If you can get them, you want it subsidized because they're paying the interest. But sometimes all you can get is an unsubsidized. Well, if you don't have the money, that's one way you'll be able to pay. There are direct loans. A direct loan comes from the government itself, not from, you know, a bank or some other institution. And I'm going to show you some interest rates in a minute. Won't that be helpful? So you can really see what I'm talking about. So the cost of attendance is everything. It's not just tuition, right? COA. So the cost of attendance is tuition, room, board, books, all of it, right? It doesn't include the transportation, flying back and forth to mom and dad kind of thing, but it does include everything for the institution. So the cost of attendance minus what you're supposed to pay equals your quote unquote need. And the CSS profile is the other way that just some of the schools, I want you to know, I don't care how wealthy you are, you need to be doing a FAFSA, whether you're going to a very elite private whether you're going to a public school or anything in between, you are going to need a FAFSA. The CSS is for certain private schools that require a lot of additional information. They want to know about your rental properties. They want to know if you have a boat. They want to know everything, right? So the CSS profile is for certain schools, and it is a deeper dive than the FAFSA. So, you know, when kids are applying to those schools, the parents have to really be ready for this CSS profile as well. So when we're talking about that gap, what we're looking at here is our need-based aid, right? So we have state-based grants. I was just sharing with somebody just recently about the Cal Grant, right? The Cal Grant for students in the state of California is going to give up to $12,000 depending on the school and the family income level. There's the direct loans. Notice the 5.5%, and then there's an origination fee on that. The direct loans, you can see the amount, 20.5K per semester. So direct loans are a little bit more than the Stafford loans at this time. The plus loans, I want you to avoid the plus loans. So these are the parent loans. Look at that, 8.05% interest, and it goes higher and higher. It's just, and look at the origination fee, 4.2% on an origination fee. It's just a very expensive form of money. Pell Grant, for those who qualify, if you're making less than $30,000 a year, in most cases, you will qualify for a Pell. But it doesn't always cover 100% of tuition. So there's a website there that you can take a look at to learn more, fsapartners.ed.gov. So that's a little bit about one of our 3 categories of financial aid, and that's helpful, isn't it? Now, separately, we have a category called institutional aid, and this is where these institutions are targeting certain families to sustain their revenue, and they are incentivizing applicants from certain demographics. So you can see more information about that here. And there are action items that I'm recommending. If you're looking at a CSS school, a school that requires the parents to fill out that form, first of all, figure out if they need it. Secondly, you know, the student needs to research or even reach out directly to the school. I want to caution, it should never be the parent reaching out on behalf of the student. You want the student to be finding out what percentage of students receive institutional aid. That means it's coming directly from the endowment of the school. And as we know, some of these, you know, very elite schools have very large endowments, which makes them very attractive because oftentimes they cover 100% of need, but they are incredibly competitive, as we all know. So we want to ask, what awards does that school have for which this particular student might be able to apply? And that could be based on GPA, their exam scores, their athletics, music talent, performing talent of other sorts. So the student can ask that directly to somebody at the financial aid office. You know, hi, I'm John Johnson. I'm interested in applying for fall of 24. I just had a couple of quick questions, and then you can literally use this as a script. And then we always want to find out which of these awards are recurring, right? Because you can get an award and it sounds good, but if you're getting $5,000, let's say, and it's not nothing, listen, hey, who doesn't, I mean, if I handed you $5,000, you'd be like, thank you so much. And I'd be like, you're welcome. Here, we're talking about, we want them to recur, right? And many awards do recur annually as long as the student's GPA stays at a B or higher. So you want to keep in mind that one-time allotment is not as valuable, and that has to be part of the, shall we say, calculus of how we're looking at financial aid. All right, and now we come to my favorite, which is merit-based financial aid. All right, this is where all of your hardworking sons and daughters can really get a reward. And the way that happens is this. Now, depending on the school, for schools that do merit-based financial aid, typically that is awarded when the unweighted GPA, that means without factoring in honors or AP, just the straight GPA, is a 3.7 or higher. There are schools that don't start their merit aid until 3.8 or even 3.9. So be aware that that varies depending on the level of selectivity of the school. The lower the admit rate of the school, it's likely the higher the unweighted GPA is going to need to be to qualify for merit-based aid. But making sure your student is getting tutoring support for whatever you need to do to get that unweighted GPA as solid as you can literally put tens of thousands of dollars in your pocket. It's so important. And obviously, as a mom, I know I wanted my kids, I've got 3 daughters. I wanted them to feel like I wasn't just like, hey, go get yourself in, but I was supporting them. And if they were struggling in math or struggling in another subject, I wanted them to have somebody that they could go to, so that was important to me as a parent. So course rigor is the second category that will determine merit-based aid. And I do have a slide that I'll show you shortly of how I recommend you think about sequencing your courses, right? Honors, AP, which is advanced placement. Some schools don't have advanced placement, which is a College Board product or a suite of curricula, but they have IB, and that one is International Baccalaureate. And both AP and IB are very attractive to admissions officers because these are college preparatory level, higher than we typically see with regular coursework in America's high schools. Exam scores, we're going to talk about exams, and I want you to know what is happening with that section of the merit-based aid equation. So typically you want them to have 1350 or higher on the SAT. And again, some of the more selective schools, they want a 1500, they want a 1530, right? 29 ACT at the low end for some schools, but the more selective schools are looking at 33s, 34s and higher out of 36. Which would be a perfect score. So your action items here, I really believe in having action items because I can just sit here and talk and you guys can be like, that was interesting, and then go turn on Netflix and then forget everything, right? That's why I hope you're grabbing some notes, writing down some questions, getting some screenshots. So really, let's apply this, you guys. Let's save some money. Let's be smart. And even if you're not the one who needs the money, somebody may need some help, and you'll be the one who can say, actually, I attended a webinar, I understand this, let me tell you what I learned, right? You can be, let's all be community with each other because there's so much stress out there about this stuff. So here are your action items. We want to always know what the average GPA, and if they wanted SAT, ACT scores, what did those look like for admitted applicants in the most recent year? And you'll find that data online. You want to encourage that your student is applying where they fall between the 25th percentile and the 75th percentile of those ranges. And if possible, you do want to give them the support they need to get that higher. And that's especially for you parents of 8th, 9th, 10th graders. The most common challenge that I see is students come to me in 11th and 12th grade, and I'm so happy to meet them and help. And also, if I'm looking at a lot of C's and sometimes D's in 9th grade, it's not unusual for a freshman to have kind of a bumpy year while they're getting their bearings. I mean, that's all getting averaged in to many schools, unless they only look at the 10 through 12, which is some school systems, but not most. And now I'm going to very quickly touch on scams, because there's a bunch of them. And this is one I've been seeing, and I want you to not fall for it. So there's this thing where these guys will be like, oh, give me $5,000 and I'm going to help you save money. And what they are like financial advisors who sell universal life insurance. and they say, oh, when we put your money into you, like you're paying me 5 and then you're taking your money and putting some of your money into this universal life insurance policy, the colleges won't be able to see it. And this idea is well proven not to be true. Look at these cute pictures. I love his little goggles. Okay, so so it is true that the FAFSA is something that is not going to see some of the ways that people try to quote unquote hide their assets. I need to say right now, I am not a financial advisor, but I follow and collaborate with several of them. And what I can tell you right now is the CSS profile for the students applying to those schools absolutely requires reporting that. And even if not at that school, you want to really think about, is this the correct move? There's a smarter move that parents can make. And we call that the EFC optimization. If you look at the bottom bullet here, the best EFC optimization tip is that some experts really do recommend, if the parents have some extra cash that's sitting in an account somewhere, that's just going to flag the schools to basically not want to offer you any need-based aid, right? The merit aid is entirely separate. Keep in mind, look at that first bullet. Merit aid is not dependent on financial filings. That is independent. So if your student gets a 36 on the ACT and has a 4.0 unweighted with a lot of course rigor, they are likely to get some really nice, sometimes 6 figures of merit-based financial aid, regardless of whether there, is anything, on the financial forms. So I do want you to look at that tip at the bottom. Parents, if you wanted to, and you could talk to your financial planner, of course, but paying down your home equity loan with any significant cash you've got is one way to keep the value of that, but not have it necessarily harm the way that you're going to be expected to pay. So your expected family contribution. So again, this is not financial advice, but I want you to be aware of scams. I want you to be aware of things that some people are doing. And, just know that these well-endowed private colleges, some of them do 100% of need, but that is decreasing. So we really want to find ways to find a right fit college, not just, look at this picture. We're not throwing darts at a dartboard and saying, oh, I don't know. There is a step-by-step process that I take my mentees through, and it involves more than 15 categories of criteria. Are they interested in, different geographic regions? Are they looking for sorority or fraternity? Do they want a big rah-rah school, or do they look for a smaller class size? What about culture? What about religious affiliations? Like, there are a lot of things that are connected to right fit colleges. And in some of the sort of exploratory sessions that I offer for folks who are interested in working with me, I actually spend a little time brainstorming in those sessions what might be a right fit, kind of like a reduced version of that, not the full thing, but I'm able to kind of get a pulse on what your student is picturing, and we can begin to sort of piece together a preliminary list, which is a pretty exciting part of the process. So did you know the national average out of 1,600 as a perfect score on an SAT is only 1083? Think about that for a second. 1083 is national average. That's not low. That's right in the 50th percentile. Okay. So if your student comes in and gets an 1100 or a 1200 and you go, oh my gosh, this is great, we're above average, and I'm happy for you. But what do you remember about what we said a moment ago? Where does merit-based financial aid start? North of 1350, often north of 1500 for the really selective schools. That 1083 is not going to cut it if it is a school that requires exams. Now, the ACT has a 36 perfect score. 21 is the national average. And again, Age starts on the low end at some schools at usually around 29. So how are you going to help your student bridge that gap so they can get a score that will help them get the aid that you're hoping for them to get? Sometimes we have to, invest in locating the right resources for our kids, so they're not just trying, but they don't have what they require. So you really want to get that score as high as possible, unless it is a test blind school. So let's look at these definitions. First of all, let's look over here. University of California, as a result of the pandemic, but then they stayed with it, and other systems, but not as many as some folks that some students probably would like. But some of them have gone test blind. And what that means is they won't see your score. Like, you could send them a Western Union telegram and say, hey, I got a 36. They're not going to look at it. They are literally test blind. All of the teenagers are shaking their head and saying, what's a Western Union telegram? I just aged myself. That's okay. I know what it is. Some of you moms and dads know what it is. That's okay. Test flexible is an interesting one. This means that, instead of SAT or ACT, these schools will look at a score, but they'll consider 2 or 3 AP scores. If your student hits a 4 or a 5 out of a 5 perfect score on AP Bio, AP Chem, AP Calc, whatever, AP US History, those can be submitted at test flexible schools, as can IB exams. Now, test optional is where we really have to tap the brakes, and let's get some clarity, guys, about what test optional actually means. Test optional sounds like, yay, it's optional. I choose no. Did I just channel your teenager? I think I did. Yeah. I have an option. Awesome. I really don't want to take that test. It sounds incredibly stressful. Well, that's true, but we want to be cautious. And I'm going to show you how to target a strategic exam for your student. And then I'm going to show you what happened last year between students who did and did not submit scores at some of the selective colleges that were test optional. You're going to be surprised with what you see, but let's do a quick little game. Okay. So everybody, you're not on camera and that's okay, but just hold up your hands. Just humor me as if I could see you. Okay. So we've got left brain, right brain. We all know we have 2 hemispheres of our brain. So there are different aspects of cognition that tend to perform better on one test versus the other when we are talking about SAT or ACT. Now, I will tell you that colleges who accept exam scores will accept either one. However, it is important to note that if your student is applying to a heavy STEM major, perhaps computer science or engineering, some of those programs have a slight preference to see an ACT score because the SAT does not have a science section and the ACT does. So I'm not saying that that is an official policy. I'm saying I've been to enough breakout sessions on campuses as I tour and really get to know these schools so that my clients have information that I've gleaned from lots and lots of college visits. That is something that I have heard. So you've got your left and your right. Now think about your student. What is the student's strongest subjects? If they are strongest in science, technology, engineering, and math, that would be sort of a strength, or we wouldn't necessarily say it's literally dominance, right? That was kind of poo-pooed several years ago in the research, but there is just an inclination for people who have these strengths to be stronger in those subjects. They're logical, sequential, rational. They think in spreadsheets. Excel is their favorite thing, right? As opposed to the right brain, where it's more holistic. They see the big picture, they synthesize things. The kids who love English, social studies, humanities, and the arts tend to have strengths on that right brain side. And here is the reveal, drum roll, and there you have it. Now, is this a flawless and perfect way to figure it out? No, it is not. The perfect way is to take a diagnostic exam. My clients all take a diagnostic exam. It's a little, $200 thing we have them do. And this is a way for my staff of, tutors and I to really see what would be a more strategic exam for them to take, and also what are the subject areas we need to remediate. Because every kid missed some school or has some gaps or weaknesses, and we want to take care of that before they're sitting there when it counts, with a number 2 pencil in their hand. So that is that. I do want you to see, here is the chart that I warned you about. So test optional policies. What you see here shows that the admit rate at the schools listed below those bars was significantly higher in many cases, with an advantage to those test submitters as compared to students who were admitted without an exam score. This is kind of a shocking chart to many of the families that I've consulted with, because they were rolling along thinking it didn't matter because it was optional. And then they realized, oh, for their school, perhaps it matters. Doesn't matter for all schools, doesn't matter for the UC system, doesn't matter for schools. If you go on their website and it says test blind, you're good to go. But if it says optional, this is what you need to be aware of, because not only does this happen, but merit-based financial aid, which you are now an expert on because we've covered it, is directly tethered to exam scores that are submitted. If the score is not submitted, the odds of merit aid coming to that student may decrease, right? Because we have so much grade inflation today. I won't bore you with a chart on that, but trust me, you can Google that, grade inflation, and you'll see the average grade in America right now is between a B and a B+. All right, here is something that also kind of puts a little bit of fear, unfortunately, into some families, because there's this idea that if I have a high GPA, I'm good to go. But if I take an exam and I land, if I have a 3.75 GPA, which is not as hard to get as it used to be, and I'm coming in the door with an 1150 SAT, look at the difference here between those tiers, right? So this, you should be reading this horizontally. If somebody really truly has a 3.75, these universities are going to be looking to see an ACT score in the 32, 33 range. And without that, there's a bit of a lack of correlation or congruence. So we're looking at 2 ways that you want to make sure your student has support: GPA support, but also test prep as part of your strategy to make sure they have not only the admit rate, as we just saw, but also a fair shot at merit-based financial aid. Very quickly, a couple more slides, and then we will go to your Q&A. So have those standing by for me. The exam timelines that I recommend is a 12-week prep cycle before they take their first exam sitting. Not all schools have score choice. That means not every school is going to allow you to withhold if your student does what some parents say, like, oh, I'm just going to have him take it and see how he does. Well, some schools are going to require, and they will average that with the score that he gets later once he's actually done his prep, and it will be a reduced perception of outcome. So just for your own edification, you should know about that score choice. You should also know about SuperScore. I'm not teaching that now, but you can Google SuperScore. Does this school SuperScore? That's an important thing to know about. Your student must have completed Algebra 2 trigonometry before they take their exam, because the math sections do go up to that level. But I will caution that very often parents wait a long time. They wait till second semester of junior year when the student took Algebra 2 more than a year ago. And that is really not in the student's best interest unless you're going to do a lot of prep to remind them of what they were focused on before. Because now if they're doing calculus, calculus is not on these exams. And the way the human memory works with recency, it's helpful to have them get this exam out of the way after Algebra 2 trig, as close to it as possible if you can. Juniors, you should spend on the kind of time you see there, a couple of hours a week with your tutor, and then at least 2 or 6 independent study hours, because it's not a magic wand when you're working with somebody helping. You have to be reinforcing what you're doing in between those sessions. I do not recommend group classes. I know they're appealing. I know they're inexpensive, but I've seen students get like 50 points or even less working in a room of 30 people where it's just scattershot. What you want is somebody who is a professional that can go straight to the heart of the matter of what questions are being missed. How can I make sure they don't keep missing those kinds of questions? And there's strategy to the timing and everything else. So that's an important thing to know. You know, your first attempt should definitely happen as, you know, it's highly differentiating if it can happen earlier. If your student is advanced in math and they can take it in 10th grade, get it out of the way, especially if they're an athlete, by the way, because athletic recruiters, they may love that your kid is a great soccer player, but if that kid's coming in the door with a, you know, sort of a lower GPA and never took an exam, or they took an exam and the score's not very high, they're going to have a hard time getting that past their admissions office. Just because the athletic division loves an applicant, or even a performing arts division for that matter, does not mean that the student doesn't have to be able to survive and thrive in those classes on that campus. And the rigor is no joke, I can tell you, when you're talking about top tier schools. So that is some really important info. I would avoid AP season. You know, it's really very difficult when students are dealing with their AP exams, and then they've got, like, usually that's around May, and then they're trying to go to prom, and some of them are taking driving lessons, and it's just like so much. So I do recommend a diagnostic exam, just to wrap up this bit about the test prep piece. 10th grade is a good time to identify the gaps. If it's 11th grade, that's fine. Get your diagnostic. If you don't have one and you'd like one, I can get you one. All right, so we are here, and here is our GPA tip, and then we're going to Q&A. So I call this the 1, 2, 3, 4 rule. And this means that you want your student, if you are looking for maximum merit-based financial aid, to have a minimum of 1 or more honors classes in 9th grade. And you certainly want to tailor that to areas of interest. If your kid loves English and the humanities and theater, by all means, this can be, you know, this can be their history, this can be their English class. You don't need to push them to do honors in subjects that they're not likely to major in college. One of the things admissions officers really look for is for there to be congruence between the extracurricular activities, the courses that they've taken. Remember, when you get to the summer before 12th grade, and I'm sitting in a session and we're doing this thing I call weaving the narrative thread, right? We're trying to weave together all these threads. I need you to have the right threads in place. And if I'm meeting you late to the party, one of the things I'm going to be looking for is, okay, what activities, what extracurriculars, what volunteerism, what was the course sequence, et cetera, et cetera. So 1 or more in 9th, 2 or more. By 10th grade, many schools do offer AP or pre-AP courses, or IB or pre-IB. You want 2 or more in 10th, 3 or more in 11th. And I am sorry for those seniors who thought they were going to go home early at lunch. Please do not plan on sort of a slacker senior year. That does not bode well if you end up on a wait list. Schools are looking to see students taking full course load, and they are looking to see that you are continuing that trend of rigor. 4 or more honors or AP, IB, or some combination of those. So that is a GPA tip, because what that does is every time they take an honors course, they're getting 4.5 averaged into the GPA instead of just 4.0 for that class. And if they take AP or IB, they get 5.0 averaged in. This is how some clients that I've worked with over the years have had a 4.5 to a 4.8 or even higher. So the question is, do you separately apply for merit scholarships and aid? When your student applies to college, typically using the Common App, which you can see at commonapp.org, what is happening is several things, but one of them is that the student is giving permission for their transcripts to be sent to the school. The school is going to see the weighted and unweighted GPA that we have been talking about on that transcript. The student is also going to have the option when they take their exams to give the college code, which will then tether through their social security number to their application when they apply. So they will see an official score report and they will see an official transcript, and they'll say, oh, okay, so Miranda had a 32 on her ACT and she has a 3.85 unweighted GPA. She's looking pretty great. We want to take a close look at her for some of this merit aid. But no, you are not having to fill out a separate application for that category. Now, scholarships at institutions can be different. This is where, if you recall, the action item that I gave you was that the student is asking, given my profile, my GPA, my talents, et cetera, are there scholarships for which I would be appropriate to apply? Because typically these are named scholarships. It might be the Dean Williamson Scholarship, and it's only for, female engineers from certain types of backgrounds, or it might be something that could be more for the general population, but they want it. I've seen scholarships for left-handed students, okay? I've seen scholarships. A lot of them are specific to, based on race, ethnicity. They can be based on only certain majors, but you want to find out from the school about the scholarship piece that are the institutional aid, but that merit aid, you'll get that offer as part of your application, because they're going to see that and they're going to love you if you have some good numbers. Here comes a present. Okay. So I'm going to describe the gift and then I'll reply to other questions that are coming in. I have a gift for the first 6 respondents who reach out to me and let me know that you would like to get 30 minutes with me for free. You want 30 minutes with me for free? You've got it. The first 6 participants are going to get some bonus gifts with that are going to help your student through this process. This is for new clients only, please. And all you have to do is text me the word bonus, and that'll come here to the office cell phone, and that'll be that. And I will respond to you and we will make it happen. As you can see, I really do love these pictures. I see Natalie, I see Lauren, I see Nathan, I see Olivia. Oh my God, I could literally go through this and name every kid here and get emotional, because I truly care about the kids that I help. Anyone who has worked with me will tell you the same. And so the opportunity here is to have a chat with someone who, I have got a proven track record, you guys. I get kids into an average of 9 colleges for every 11 applications they submit. Now, I take that back. I don't get them in, right? I coach them, I mentor them, they get themselves in. But my point here is a good one, which is that the amount of strategy I have covered just in the last hour, I could literally do a 6-hour webinar and still not run out of things to say and not repeat myself. I'm sure you're not surprised. So it's important to access support when it's available, because I have been told again and again that whatever amount parents have invested to enroll their student with me or with my tutoring staff was a drop in the bucket compared to the aid that came back to them as a result of positioning their student competitively. And that's what this is all about. Like, let's get them into the best possible school. So you're going to text the word bonus. Tell me the parent name, the student name, and grade level. You're sending it to 310-729-3402, and we will take it from there. And I'm looking forward to meeting some of you online and, helping you in whatever ways I can in those 30 minutes, which will be my gift to you. All right, so I have another question, a follow-up question. So is that total 10 AP classes in all 4 grades? No, it is not. Gosh, that would be too much. It's very unusual to see 10 AP classes by senior year. That would be less than 10% of students that would be performing at that level, although I see it. I do see it. But those are kids who have no sports, no extracurriculars, and very little sleep. Because if you've ever taken it or taught, I used to be an AP Lit and language teacher. It's just an extraordinary amount of work for each of those classes. But my point to you was, and we can go back and look at that slide, if they do 1 or 2 honors in 9th, and then 1 honors and 1 AP in 10th, it's more typical that I would see in 10th grade 1 AP or 1 IB and then 1 honors. And it should be said, IB has both just certificates if they do classes, but there's also IB diploma, which is a bigger thing. You will know about that through your high school if they have the IB program. But I would say for competitive schools, you're definitely looking for 5 to 7 AP classes if you can make that happen, only if it's the right fit for students. Let me make sure I say, I don't want you stressing out your son or daughter. If the right fit for them is not that is perfectly fine. They may be a great fit for an in-state school where they'll get a great education and live a happy life. And isn't that the point? This is not about chasing prestige. This is about our precious babies who we love, who we can't even believe are this age. My youngest is 22 now, you guys. So I really do know personally, just a mother's heart and what it takes to bring them into this world and raise them up and do the tooth fairy under their little pillows and make their birthday cakes. And then they're teenagers and they don't like us as much for a little while. And then they come back around, I promise. And then they love us like crazy again. But these are the important, you're making some important moves because you've invested 16, 17 years to get them to this point. And this is really a time where you want not to be in contention or friction with your son or daughter. And that is probably the most common thing I hear from my, clients who decide to work with me. They're like, I just want to be mom. I just want to be there for her. I don't want to be on her back. And I'm like, so I'll come in, I'm not going to be on her back. I'm going to be coaching, cheering, mentoring, but I will hold your student responsible and accountable, because if they say they want a certain outcome, I'm the lady who can tell them exactly what that takes. So like, are we doing this or not? And that way you can, make some cookies and, sit on the sofa with them, be the mom, or be that dad. So yeah, I hope that clarifies that question. So you can see here my available services. These are some of the things that I do with my clients. And again, I'm happy to talk about any of these things as you text the word bonus to me with your student information so that I can get you hooked up for those 30 minutes free. So available services. And then these were some of your burning questions, and I'm just going to keep going because I just know that some of you would like to ask some of these questions. I'm not going to go through these unless somebody wants to unmute and ask out loud some of these questions, but I'm happy to answer these. And then, we just have a last slide, which is, I love this slide so much. Tell me how I can help your baby. I know that's your baby. I know you love that child. So tell me how I can help.
So could you please talk about the first bullet just a little bit more? Like, how do you approach that one? Just the first one.
Sure. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Sure thing. So researching the right schools is something that is overwhelming, I think, when you just go out onto the internet and you try to Google like, what is the best school? And then people end up on US News and World Report, right? And they're like, well, these are the top 25 schools, so these must be the good ones. Well, they may not be the right fit, right? So I talk a lot about right fit. And that's based on, as I mentioned earlier, those 15 or more criteria of geographic region. Are they between the 25th and 75th percentile for that school? Is it a cultural fit? I really want to say when parents don't bring in, sort of context to it, and they're just thinking, I want my kid to go to Vanderbilt, and they're not factoring in that culturally, Vanderbilt is a very specific, I'm just using that as an example. It's a great school. I send students to Vanderbilt pretty much every year or every other year. That's one that they like to go to, or Northwestern or Duke or Georgetown. It's not only Ivy League, although I certainly help kids get into Ivies. And a lot of parents who want their kids to go to Columbia come to me because they're like, well, she got herself into Columbia, right? Well, yeah, I did, but that was a few years ago. So beware of people telling you they can get your student into college just because they got in. But yeah, the research of the right schools. So I have inside my technology, which is called GATE. I mentioned earlier that I'm a founder of 3 companies. GATE College System, if you wanted to look at openthegate.us, that is a website where you can learn about the technology. It's not for sale, so there's no sales pitch. The only people get access to that is through engaging with my team and me. But on GATE, we have like a whole process. It's interactive. It's very dynamic. Students really enjoy it. So we build the list using some proprietary software that my staff, 40 members of my staff and I developed over these last few years in Los Angeles. So that's how we do it. But you can look at College Board. Big Future would be a public website you could consider. You can also, the federal government has quite a few different websites as well, where you can look at net price calculators and other materials that are through the Department of Education. So those would be some public resources that you could also access. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, hi, please go ahead.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. I just wondered, how can you really tell what schools will give merit scholarships or not? So I've heard, as an example, my son is interested in possibly applying to NYU. And I've heard that NYU does not really offer merit-based scholarships. Like they don't offer enough money to make it realistic to go there. So how do you determine, what schools will and what schools won't?
So I have a resource that I share with my clients. And if you wanted to connect with me, Mindy, I'd be happy to share that with you in our exploration session. It wouldn't be a big deal for me to give it to you. This is, so we're talking right now about generosity. And I want you to know that part of NYU's deal is it's in New York and they get floods of applicants from out of state because all these kids, they want to study, they want to walk around Washington Square Park.
Right.
It'd be fabulous,
Yeah.
And especially if they're in the performing arts, right? They're in, business, if they're in finance, that's where they're like, oh, I see myself at NYU. But if they're applying from out of state, it's even less likely.
Right.
And you're not incorrect about that assessment, but text me your thing and we can meet and I'll make that one of your bonus gifts. Because although it doesn't cover all colleges, and by the way, fun fact, there are more than 4,000 colleges in the United States. So, but I've been at this long enough to know what are the sort of I would say top, several hundred schools that students tend to be interested in attending. And I have a lot of that data that I'll share with you. I think that'll help. There's not a public way. If they did that, I mean, think about it from their point of view.
I know.
It's like a darn chess game. And I just feel like I wish there could be so much more transparency in these things. It creates such angst unnecessarily for parents. It's like, just tell us what it is. And
Right.
and it's like smoke and mirrors, because they're trying to compete their way up the US News and World Report. They want to seem, and now with the recent Supreme Court thing, regardless of anybody's opinion on affirmative action, that changed a lot of the calculus inside of admissions offices as they look at applications. They don't want to seem like they don't care about equity, but they also really like money.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's,
They're a business.
what's a guy going to do? Yeah, it's big. It's a $100 billion business. So,
Mhm.
you know, I think part of the strategic mindset, and I do play chess, by the way, and I think about this as I'm working with my clients as like, okay, it's not about gaming there's no game per se. There's just making smart moves and applying to schools where, you know, you are plausibly convinced that you've got a good shot of getting into 9 out of 11, which is, you know, as I said, my stat. Because I don't want kids, you know, what hurts my heart is when kids come in and they're like, I've already got my list. I just want you to help with essays. And I will do that. Believe me, if you've got a senior out there and all you need is essay support because you've got a list, I will give feedback if invited to. I can tell you that typically it is not a balanced list. These kids come in and they're listing Notre Dame as a safety. I'm like, I don't think so. You know, Notre Dame is a moonshot with whatever kind of scores in GPA for most students. And, you know, I think it's kind of, and this is where the mom in me just gets a little tender, because I never want a student to feel discouraged or like, I fell short. I can't reach the brass ring, or whatever kind of ideology we have in this country. You know, again, at the end of the day, what you want and what I want is for this student to find a right fit school that launches them to a happy future in a major. And we haven't even talked about majors tonight, but you need them in a non-impacted major. That's an important part of the service that I provide, helping them not just apply as business, which is 18% of males and 16% of females in this country these days, but finding, is it international business? Is it marketing? Is it finance? Is it accounting? Like helping them identify the options within broad majors so they're applying into a smaller applicant pool is another tip that I'll mention in context here. But, you know, I'll share that list with you, Mindy. I'm happy to. And I appreciate the question.
Thank you.
I see that one of my current mentees is in here. I'm going to invite him to say something quickly. Hey, Will, are you willing to unmute yourself?
Yeah, definitely the list building was a big part, and it really helped me kind of focus all my energy on kind of finding the right school for me and shortening that list as much as I can.
Absolutely. And Will, you're also working with some of my test prep tutors. How's that going?
Going well. I've definitely picked up some tricks that I can use, like a lot with timing mostly, and then some other stuff as well. That's really helping me kind of boost my score as much as I can.
Yeah, you're such a strong student with your GPA, and I'm really happy you're doing that. All right, guys. So, you know, you can hear there. Thanks, Will. Thanks for saying hi to everybody. Listen, guys, I mean, it would be very, very easy for me just to lie. That was coincidental. I didn't know Will was going to be with us, but I'm pleased that you're there, Will. And hopefully you learned something new. The rest of you, I hope and trust that you learned some things that are valuable to you. Again, my name is Pamela Donnelly. I am your go-to for college admission support. I love this stuff. I'm obsessed. And I look forward to hearing from you and how I can help. And that's it for now. If you want to reach me directly on email, it's Pamela M. Donnelly Consulting @gmail.com. All right, guys, wishing you the best. Have a great rest of your evening. Bye-bye.